I messed up a little bit. I spent too much money on it, and I'll tell you why. And it's kind of a lesson about don't let your emotions get in the way. Say it with me, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Hey guys, welcome to Cheap Old Cars. Today, we're not going to be talking about a car, we're going to be talking about a bicycle. Now you might say, hey, what the heck's going on here? Why are we talking about a bicycle? Well, it's because I like mechanical things, and I like wheels and machines that move, and I'm also a bit overweight, and so going for long walks or jogs is painful on the knees, so I ride bicycles. And if you really need Mustangs, here's your Mustang fix. Got the Mach 1 and the Bullet. And over here, we have a Mistachrome crash bumper. Those were not clear coated from the factory. I have an old video a ways back. I bought that and it's just the paint, right? Just the color. And I clear coated it so it does all the color shifty stuff. It looks awesome. Now the point of today's video is mainly to go over what I'm doing to this bike and why this bike and all the things about this bike. But really, I messed up a little bit. I spent too much money on it, and I'll tell you why. And it's kind of a lesson about don't let your emotions get in the way of what you're going to spend, because you need to keep track of your money. So anyway, this is a 2013 Trek 4900, okay? 2013 was the last year of the nicer Trek 26-inch wheeled bikes. And it had an XT derailleur, rear derailleur, a Dior front derailleur, SLX brakes, and then the crankset was, a BB51 bottom bracket, and then kind of Shimano Dior cranks. So nothing crazy, but it was still a Holotech crank, right? Which is stiffer and quite a bit stronger. No, it wasn't one of the heavier crank sets, but it's not a big deal. I much prefer that type of bottom bracket over like a square taper if you're talking entry or level bikes, because with me being as big as I am in a square taper, I can actually feel the flex. And so I really prefer that style of bottom bracket. Now the thing was about this bike, and the reason I thought it was cool, and the reason I bought it in 2013, it was like $1,000 back then. Jeez. The reason I bought it was because it was kind of that last hurrah of 26-inch wheeled mountain bikes, and I was super into that at the time. But it was also a really good bang for the buck. And I'm a sucker for a deal. I love the bang for the buck aspect of it. You know, this bike really might have been right about at the middle of their cross-country hardtail lineup. Big part of the reason for buying it was because it had some parts from the 53 and 5500s of the previous year. So the XT rear derailleur, the SLX brakes and stuff, that had been on a higher level, 1 or 2 steps up the previous year. And then the previous year, the 4900 didn't have that level of parts on it. I looked at this thing as, I don't know, there's no truth to this. This is just me blabbing, but it felt like this was going to be the last one, and they kind of, yes, they probably had some stuff left over, bought this order of this, so they had more XT rear derailleurs and stuff, and like they gave it some extra goodness as kind of like a send-off, a happy farewell. So I thought that was really rad, and I was a fan of it. And I'd had my first nice bike was a 2011 Gary Fisher Wahoo, which I really enjoyed, and I kind of wish I hadn't sold that. It always made my right knee hurt a little bit for some reason. I don't know why. I had sold that bike, and then I got a Marlin, 2013 Marlin, I think, which was, maybe it was 2012. I don't remember. Anyway, it was green. It was cool. It was a 29er, and I put a Fox fork on it. I had sold my 26er Wahoo, and I was like, I want another 26er. I think they're pretty cool. I understand 29-inch wheels go over stuff better. I get that. I have 29-inch bikes. Yeah, I just thought it was cool, so I bought it. So 2013, 2014 was when I was doing my master's degree. It was really tough, and I stopped riding as much because I was working full-time and going to school full-time, and it took 40 hours a week to get a B. I had bought in 2014 my full suspension, but I was still riding the Marlin some. I don't know. With the Fox fork on the Marlin, it was a really fun bike. So I ended up riding that more, but I had this, and I didn't end up riding it much. Fast forward a few years, I kind of spent a lot of time on that. Fast forward a few years, it's 2019, my son's 4, and he's, a little guy. I was thinking about keeping this one for him when he grew up, but then like, how long is it going to be before he's on a medium frame bike? So I sold it. He's 11 now, and he's been on a medium frame bike since a little bit last year when he was 10, because he's like 5'2". He grew huge really quick, and he's got long legs too. So he can be on a medium frame at 5'2", whereas typically you want to be about 5'5" or so. And I sold it to some people that lived a couple streets over. And I mean, they showed up here. One kid showed up on a bike. The dad was in a golf cart, and like, another kid was on a motorcycle. They just like came over here as a pack, and they bought it, and rode it home. And I was like, cool, they're going to get use out of it. They're going to ride it. And that kid rode it a long time. I think he's in college now because it's, that was 2019, it's 2026. We're like 7 years later. So kids grow up a lot in 7 years. Anyway, yeah, so he wasn't riding anymore. He's doing college thing, and I saw it on Facebook Marketplace for sale. And I was like, I think that's my old bike. But then I'm looking at it, and there's a couple things that were different, which obviously people can change things, but I'm like, I don't know. Now, one thing on the chainstay over there was a race face chainstay protector that was like zip tied on, and it was too big, and I squeezed it down and zip tied it, and that really, really looked like my old bike. And my wife's like, I think that's your old bike. I was like, I don't know. So it was posted October 25, and finally in like February of 26. So many months later, I reached out to the guy, and I was talking to him, and back and forth messaging about being interested in the bike, and it was a medium frame. I'm like, okay, cool. So it'll be the fit. And I'm like, it's like the bike I used to have. And I said, hey man, I sold a bike a lot like this. I don't remember the guy's name I sold it to. I said, but you didn't happen to used to live, and I gave the street name he lived on, because it was, like I said, it's a couple streets over. I knew the house that they lived in, because sometimes when I come home, sometimes I went by there and I'd see the bike sitting outside on the, like laying in the front yard or whatever. I'm like, hey, it's my bike, cool. Anyway, I was like, hey, do you used to live on, X street? And he was like, yeah. He's like, wait, are you the guy that sold me the bike? I'm like, yeah, I sold you the bike. And so we worked out a deal, and I paid a little too much for it. I'll tell you, I paid $275 for it. And I'm looking, even though it's an older bike, I know it had good parts on it. It was in pretty good shape and all the things. And then my wife's looking at the pictures going, I think you should maybe offer less. It looks a little rough. And I'm like, it's okay. It's probably just dirty and different things. And then we go to buy it, and he's like, you want to ride it around or anything? And I was like, no, it's cool. Here's money. Let's just snag it and go. And I didn't look it over. I let my kind of emotions of being like, oh, it's my old bike. That's really cool. I let that kind of get the best of me. And then I got it home. Now, when I say I overpaid and I paid $275, I probably should have paid $175, $200, somewhere in there. So, and that's not like a huge deal. Like, let's say I overpaid $100. Maybe that's worth the nostalgia. Maybe that's worth the memories of how I got my old bike back. But really, in the end, it's just a bike that I never really rode. I don't know if that's worth it. So anyway, let's kind of go over what I'm having to fix, change, and upgrade. Okay, let's start at the back since I'm here. Rear derailleur hanger is scratched up pretty good, but it's got, looks like it took some hits. The rear derailleur took quite a few hits, that Shimano XT derailleur. And I've taken it off because when I get through here, I'm tell you what I'm going to do to the bike. So the rear derailleurs come off, and then the cassette over here, the teeth are just like super, super wore down, and the chain's gone, as you can see, because there's no drivetrain on it right now. So the chain's off of it, and the chain was just like full of mud. And it was, I didn't even need to put a chain gauge on it because it was stretched out. You could see that. The cassette teeth were wore down. The chain ring teeth were wore down. It was a 3x10 drivetrain, which I know that's like ancient now. Everybody does like 1x12 stuff now. Those teeth were super wore down, all three gears. There were teeth that were like down to little rounded over nubs, which I'm glad the bike got used. That's cool. The rear hub is still full of mud. The nuts on it were loose. I could take the rear hub apart by hand, down to the little ball bearings in there. And I'm going to have to take it apart. And when I do the final thing to the bike, I'm going to take the whole hub apart, clean it out really well, re-grease it and everything. And it'll be fine after that point. Moving forward, okay, the brakes. Since there's a brake back here, we'll just talk about both brakes at the same time. I take back what I earlier said. I said this thing had SLX brakes no, it didn't. It had some Avid hydraulic brakes on it from the factory. I had taken those Avid brakes and put them on a different bike that I ended up selling. And so then I pulled the SLX brakes off of my EX7 that I wasn't riding either and put those on here. So that's why this one had SLX brakes. I apologize for that earlier mistake. Anyway, so I pulled the SLX, So one of the SLX brakes I put on it was still there. The other one had been changed out to a Dior hydraulic brake, which is fine, but something got messed up somewhere, who knows what, and they changed it out. Both of the levers were like squeaky. The one SLX, which has the adjustable reach on it, the little screw-in nub was missing, and then it was like super loose, and it sounded like there was parts like flopping in the hinge. I'm not mad at the people. the bike was used and it was used well and it's had a life, and I'm going to give it a second life, and that's cool. But mainly just saying, like, look over things before you buy them, right? Okay. So anyway, I went ahead and threw those brakes away. I just tossed them because you can get new Dior level brakes for like $60. So front and rear, like, it's not a big deal. Seat tube. Seat tube. If you know about bikes, you know that's way too short. So basically, this seat tube is cut down to be like this all the time. I mean, you can't run it up here. That puts too much flex on stuff, makes the frame flex too much. It has to have a minimum insertion depth, and they cut it way down. I got some paint on my finger. They cut it way down. I'm still leaving it on here for right now because I don't have a bike stand. And so when I'm doing some of the things that I'm working on it, I'm like flipping it over on its handlebars and seat. So then we move up to the bottom bracket. If I would have picked up the bike and spun the pedals backwards or forwards before purchasing it, I would have immediately tried to offer less. The bearings down here sounded like running gravel through gravel. I mean, it was like, oh goodness. Went ahead, and this has been over a while, right? So I bought a bicycle toolkit that had the specific tools to take off those Shimano bottom bracket cups and all the stuff, right? So, and I've already got a bunch of tools so I can make do other places. And if I need to buy a specific little tool for something, I can. But park tool stuff is nice, but it's really expensive. Anyway, so taking those off, and it's just metal shavings and mud. And so the bearings had disintegrated, right? And I actually ended up having a piece of metal in my finger I had to pull out with tweezers. I've kept the crank off of it. The crank was actually fine, and the chain rings were bolt-on, so I could use that crank somewhere else. I'm not going to use it on this, but I've kept the crank. I've kept good pieces. Like I said, I probably could have kept the brakes and reused them somewhere, but it's fine. But I've kept good pieces. I'm going to toss the saddle because it's coming apart back here, and the seat tube. You can still get the seat tube through Trek, which is pretty cool. I can still get the derailleur hanger. I'm going to snag another one of those. Rotors are pretty straight. Wheels aren't bad. I went ahead and replaced the front tire. It was gone. I should have went ahead and done, just bought a rear tire too, because this one's still got some tread, but when you compare it to the front, because they're both the Specialized ground control, when you compare it to the front, it's like, oh yeah, it's more wore down than I thought. So gonna have to replace that too. And I say that's like a thing, because when I used to ride a bunch, let's say 2011 through 2013, I guess just a few years there, but when I was riding a bunch, I could get nice bike tires for like $30. They ain't $30 anymore. These are like 60, 50 to 60, somewhere in there. All the parts are like 2 or 3 times what I was used to. So when I'm going through and I'm buying stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insanity. The front fork, we'll get there. The front fork was an SR Suntour coil spring fork. It did have remote lockout, which was kind of cool. You don't see that very often on those coil spring forks. It was garbage. Seals are gone. Not gone, but like seals weren't working very well. It was leaking stuff out of them. The steer tube was rusty in places. And the cable to the cable at the remote lockout had been like bent over and it's frayed and all kinds of stuff. So you'd have to replace all that. I was like, nope, fork in the trash. I had a Fox fork. It was black. And it was 2010, 2011-ish era. I sold it on eBay because the steer tube was too short for this. And I bought this one. Now this one, if I push on it, I don't know if you guys can kind of hear those squeaks, but this one could use some work, some refresh. That's a 2008 to 10, somewhere in there fork. So it's pretty old, but they're rebuildable. You can still get the seals. You can still get all the stuff. The fork's in good shape, and the steer tube was what I needed in terms of length. So I'll get that serviced and that'll be fine. I've changed the handlebar already. This is a carbon bar that we're going to leave on here, but you probably won't be able to hear that. Maybe you can. I don't know. I tried to get it close to my microphone. But yeah, the headset bearings are not in great shape. So I'm going to do a new headset. Basically, I am replacing everything on the bike except for the frame and the wheels and the brake rotors. And it's going to be a little expensive. So like I said, I sold a Fox fork and bought that one. It would have been a wash, right? But eBay's fees are so much that I ended up being out about $50 for that fork. So that's not a huge deal, right? That's not bad. I had the carbon handlebar forever. I bought these Race Face red grips because they match the grips that I put on my kid's other bike, his 29er. And then I've got some Race Face Chester red pedals that'll go on this as well. So we got the Fox fork. The wheels are in decent shape. They're not super lightweight, but they're fine. Gonna get a new tire, seat post, and both my son and I like the Specialized Bridge 143 millimeter saddle. So we've got those on all our other bikes. We're gonna get one for this too. Here's what I'm gonna do to the rest of the bike. Shorter stem, bring the handlebar back some. I might even get a bar that has a bit more of a rise than this one. I'm not sure. If I can find one on sale. I really like carbon bars because they just kind of filter out some of the little vibrations that come up through and just makes it smoother and easier on your wrists. Maybe I'm a wuss, whatever, I like them. We still have the rear derailleur on here, but that's going to go away. I have all ready for it Dior level brakes, so not adjustable. They're 2-finger brakes, so it's not the 1-finger stuff, but they're fine, more than adequate. So I've already got some of those. Now the ones I bought off eBay for like $66 front and rear, they have the iSpec EV mounts, which means instead of the let's say the bracket for the bar is here and then the body of the brake starts here, on the iSpec EV ones, the bracket goes into like the middle of the body, and then this part over here has a little piece that comes down and touches the handlebar, so when you squeeze, it doesn't flex the body of the brake. But that doesn't allow you to run older style shifters because there's not room to get the shifter over far enough. And I didn't know that, so I bought those brakes for 66 bucks, and then for an extra 15, I bought some older style levers. And I have a bleed kit and everything, so it's not hard to swap out the levers. For the stem, I'm going with that Husfelt one. That's just short and cheap, like it's fine. Drivetrain, doing a SRAM NX Eagle 1x12, and that's going to be about $400, I think, which kind of sucks, but that is what it is. Obviously non-boost frame, but they make that stuff. I really have always done Shimano stuff on all my bikes, and I was kind of going after the Shimano stuff, but then I'm like, well, you can't run their cassettes on these older HG style wheels, the HG spline or whatever for the cassette, and you can run the SRAM NX Eagle stuff on those. So then I was looking at, there's another company called Sunrace, or I don't remember, something like that, that makes a cassette. I could go that way, but then it's like, well, it doesn't cost any more to get on some of these websites that have stuff on sale and just get the whole NX Eagle set up. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to go 1x12 NX Eagle, new seat post, saddle, new rear tire, already got a new front tire, new Dior brakes, Fox fork that needs to get serviced, shorter stem, carbon bar. Also, Cane Creek, it's on my computer over there, Cane Creek headset. And then at that point, this will be a pretty rad little bike. Now, I do understand that it's old and has old geometry and everything, but it's going to be a good bike. You know, you don't have to have modern geometry to be able to ride trails. Now, maybe that modern geometry will help on some of these a little bit more technical and aggressive trails they have now, but there's some good trails around here that are just good old school cross country, and this will be more than adequate. I've still got to spend like 600 bucks on it to get it done, which is hurtful. I hope you enjoyed this video. You know, I like bicycles as well as cars. It's all the mechanical stuff, and I enjoy working on this stuff. I enjoy vintage radios and pew-pews and all kinds of things, so I just like working on things. I'm a bit of just a tinkerer, I guess. But yeah, this is super fun. I've never done a lot of this stuff with drivetrains on bikes, so I'm learning a lot in how to do that stuff. And, you know, maybe I'll switch one of my other bikes over to a 1x12 as well. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you just want to see car stuff, let me know. But, you know, I do every now and then throw in something different on the channel here. This will probably screw with the algorithm and won't get any views, but hey, whatever. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.